The second level of telling the truth is to begin to speak forth the emotional truth and the truth of one's judgments to reveal one's constantly active, secret mind. You begin here the practice of admitting how you feel when you feel it, speaking your secret judgments of others out loud, and constantly revealing your own petty and condescending ways. The first thing people usually think about this next step is, oh no, not more. This is often where people take what psychoanalytic therapists call the flight into health. They say, you're a great doctor and a wise person, and you have changed my whole life and helped me a lot, and I'm eternally grateful. I'm going to split. Thank you. Goodbye. This response is the mind's attempt to recontrol the situation, take a break and reconceptualize and take charge of the being again before things get out of hand. The flight into health is flight away from a new, scary, but far more effective method of making things happen in the world. Telling the truth creates clearings between yourself and other people where there is a possibility of sharing and creating together. Recontrol by the mind's secret self-protective judging hidden self is the attempt to go back to the safer feeling, hard-earned adolescent way of being that worked before and should work again, but leaves you always trying to eat the menu rather than the meal. The second level of telling the truth, revealing the emotional and judgmental truth on a moment-by-moment basis, is damned hard work, and it never ends. Therapy ends, but this work never ends. Therapy ends when the person takes over the task of telling the truth, steady as she goes, as her own task and as her own alternative to manipulation. Manipulating and strategizing and having secret plans and conspiracies is one way to operate in the world to create the appearance of a successful life. But the appearance of a successful life is to a successful life as the menu is to a meal. The appearance of success is a performance in which you are cut off from contact with the audience except through your role. A successful life, in contrast, is one in which you can share with others openly as your life happens without all that rehearsal. The contrast is between performance and sharing. The alternative to telling the simple truth about your feelings and thoughts as they occur is a kind of pathetic bragging one is left with in later life, even if one has made money, the usual measure of success, but remained an isolated manipulator. Manipulation never works to get the results desired, but it always seems like it's just about the work. It always seems like it's just about to work. When you get what you said you wanted by manipulation, it is never enough. When you tell the truth and get what you want, getting what you want is like gravy. It feels like you are getting more than you ever hoped for, rather than just okay, but not quite good enough. I feel like I'm going to read that paragraph again. That's important. Manipulation never works to get the result desired, but it always seems like it's just about to work. When you get what you said you wanted by manipulation, it is never enough. When you tell the truth and get what you want, getting what you want is like gravy. It feels like you are getting more than you ever hoped for, rather than just okay but not quite good enough. We all get to make this choice between manipulation and communication over and over again in life. John Stevens, a Gestalt educator, wrote beautifully in his book, Awareness, about the dilemma of trying to win love through manipulation as opposed to communication. A great deal has been written about trust and love, and that if you can build a trusting, loving relationship, then people can be honest with each other. I believe this idea is exactly backwards. It is very nice if I feel trusting and loving towards someone, but if I don't feel this way, what can I do about it? Trust and love are my feeling responses toward another person, and these responses cannot be manufactured. Either I feel love or I don't. All the emphasis on trust and love results in many people pretending to feel trust and love, because it is healthy and will bring about a closeness and honesty, etc., adding a new area of phoniness and dishonesty in their behavior. Honesty, however, is a behavior and is something I can choose or not choose. I cannot decide to love or trust, but I can decide to be personally honest or not. And when I choose to be really honest and say what I experience and what I feel, I am showing that I can be trusted. This is the only kind of behavior that can bring about a response of trust. Trust is my response to a person that I know I can believe. Even if I dislike a person, I can trust him if he is honest with me, and I can respect his willingness to be himself honestly. Likewise, honesty does not always bring a response of love, but it is absolutely essential to it. When I am honestly myself, and you respond warmly and with caring, then love exists. If I calculate and put on a phony behavior in order to please you, you may love my behavior, but you cannot love me, because I have hidden my real existence behind this artificial behavior. Even when you love in response to my phony behavior, I cannot really receive your love. It is poisoned by my knowledge that the love is for the image I have created, not for me. I also have to be continually on guard to be sure that I maintain my image so that your love does not disappear. Since I have shut myself off from your love in this way, I will feel more lonely and unloved, and try even more desperately to manipulate myself and you in order to get this love. In contrast, when I am honestly myself and you respond to me as I am in that moment, I can receive this fully and know the satisfaction of being really related with you. This honest relating is not always joyful or pleasant. It is sometimes sad, sometimes angry, etc. But it is always solid and real and vitally alive. This vitality of relationship is, in fact, the love we try so desperately to win. It is only available to people who practice telling the truth. The second level of telling the truth comes about through experimenting, usually in group therapy as well as in real life, to find out the difference between trying to make things happen through manipulation and having things happen through telling the truth. Once you decide to live that way, you have to continue to work away at it, because the most important thing to know about the truth is that it changes. You can be really mad at someone and hurt by him or her and stay stuck there. Or you can tell them and express it out loud, and what was true a moment ago becomes no longer true. You can tell them and express it out loud, and what was true a moment ago becomes no longer true. Beth and Mark had both been in therapy with me in the earlier part of their relationship about 10 years ago. She is 45 years old and he is 29. She is divorced with 2 grown children. He graduated from college 5 years ago. They relocated twice since he found work after graduating. He lost his job and decided to leave Beth and to go live with a younger woman he had met and had a brief affair with. He had told Beth almost everything, but was still in a panic of sorts about it all. He came to see me for one visit. I had him go back and talk to Beth and tell her in greater detail everything he had done and everything he appreciated for her for, and everything he resented her for, and all of his thoughts, ideas, and opinions. He did tell her all that he had done. They argued and cried, and then he moved to the city where he planned to seek work and live with his new lover. Beth kept crying and was really suffering for weeks. She couldn't stop grieving and suffering and hating him for his betrayal and missing him and loving him at the same time. Finally, having driven a considerable distance to see me, she told me she was trying to keep from thinking about killing herself. She also told me that she and Mark had made a pledge to stay out of contact with each other for 3 months. I thought that was a mistake. I told her to call Mark and have him come to see her so she could tell him her resentments again, her appreciations, judgments, evaluations, and everything she could come up with again, and to use the talk with him as an opportunity for her to experience completely the feelings she had and let them go away. I recommended that instead of avoiding and waiting to see what happened if they stayed apart, that they get together and let the past die. I told her to get a mediator and gave her the name of a therapist in town where she lived. I told her to get the mediator to make sure she completed the job. She left to go home for Thanksgiving, having decided to face the music. A few days later, we got this letter from Beth. Dearest Brad and Amy, Mark left about 30 minutes ago, and I want to let you know that all is fine. Brad, for the first time in my life, didn't do what you said. I didn't get a mediator. I didn't even try. I found I didn't need it, and I was more comfortable with the idea of not having one. Mark arrived here about 11:15 this morning and stayed until 5:30. I knew when he walked in the door that he wasn't going to stonewall me. The first thing I said was, "May I give you a hug?" He said yes, and we hugged for a long... Oop, I lost my place. He said yes, and we hugged for a long moment. Then we sat down and talked and talked. After a while, actually a long while, I fixed us some dinner and we ate and talked some more. He cried a lot and I cried some. I told him all the things I wanted to say, all the resentments and all the appreciations. At this point, all of the resentments turned out to be appreciations anyway, which is always a miracle to me when it happens. I said I was glad he had left and glad I had been precipitated into crisis, because I wouldn't have missed doing this for anything in the world. I had needed to do a lot of this and had never done it, and now I have. At least I've started. He said he hadn't allowed himself to grieve much at all. He told me that he still loved me too, and that he had missed me in every room of the house and everywhere he had been and all of the time. I said that I cherished the love I have for him, and that what was left was for me to become detached from him, and that I was on my way to doing that. I really don't believe that I left anything unsaid that I needed to say, and if I did, I'll have a chance to say it another time. We're going to keep in touch, and he asked if he could come back when he was ready to talk about himself. Mostly today, what he did was have very strong grief reactions and sadness to what I said to him. At one point, we held each other and kissed, and I told him I appreciated him for doing that, because it was the first time I had felt horny since he had walked out the door, and I hadn't been sure I still had that reaction in me. Eventually, we made love, and beautifully and really good, and I was glad for that, and didn't feel as if I couldn't bear to let him go, if that makes any sense. You were right, Brad, in that I did find that Mark is not as evil as I had believed and a lot more desperate than I had thought. And it's not my problem anymore. I told him I'd be as good a friend to him as I could, and that I couldn't rescue him. I had tried, and it just hadn't worked. I had, by the way, a perfectly wonderful Thanksgiving. My sister was here, and her son, and of course, Mother, and we had a great dinner and a lot of laughing and talking. I found ever since Tuesday that I can laugh with my whole self again. And I can still be sad and miss Mark and hate thinking about Christmas without him. And I am just a little relieved that I have had those reactions, since I believe I would be just a bit strange not to have them. Since I started sorting out what was going on with me, I found some patterns of behavior in me that I didn't recognize before, like what a controlling person I've been, for one, and the classic caretaker type person, obsessed with the behavior of someone else. And I found that I probably have another big problem to work on, and I don't know in the slightest how to start, although I imagine I'll get to it eventually. That is, being a non-achiever. I wouldn't even classify myself as an underachiever. There's bound to be some pattern I learned somewhere along the way that I bought into. Anyway, that's where I am. And I send loads of love to you both for the part you played in my gaining insight with which to work, and the push I needed to plunge myself into the depths of despair and horror in order to get out of it. And, above all, I love you both for the love and support you showed me. Another thing that's come out of this is the knowledge that I have more friends than I knew I had, and most of them care enough to tell me the truth, at least as far as they can see it, and for some, it's pretty far. Much love, Beth. Beth cured her incessant grieving by contact and open conversation with Mark. When incessant grieving occurs, it is usually out of the person's attempt to handle anger by crying and feeling bad and having obsessional thoughts. Once the resentment and appreciation and hurt get sorted out and expressed, the grieving subsides enough for the person to make a new start. The person forgives her lover, not for the lover's benefit, but for her own. She experiences the love and lets go. She experiences the hatred and lets go. Finally, she experiences the grief and lets go. In the process, she forgives herself, because in that deeper self, formed back when she was a very small child, she felt like anything bad that happened was really her fault. So in the process of getting into and getting over rotten feelings about others, we get over the rotten feelings about ourselves. Through the process of forgiving our enemies, our own forgiveness occurs. This is why we have to forgive others, for our own benefit. Beth forgave Mark and herself. Then she stopped taking care of him by protecting him from the truth of her anger and her love and her notions about him. She stopped taking care of him by protecting him from the truth of her anger and her love and her notions about him. Mark was another story, because he felt guilty for having hurt her by running off with another woman, and a younger one at that. He couldn't add insult to injury, so he never allowed himself to get mad at her. He was desperate over having lost his job and his former relationship, two roles in which he had felt safe, though also trapped for a long time. A few months later, he killed himself in his new girlfriend's apartment. His anger never sufficiently expressed, his fear never sufficiently acknowledged, his judgments never sufficiently exposed to another, wore him out, and his mind ate him. He had told the truth about what he had been hiding from Beth at level 1, but he held back on sharing his feelings with anyone during this time of great stress and distress. He engineered his suicide with great skill and deliberation. His mind was thorough and efficient. Only his relatedness was impaired. He used his mind to kill himself to escape his mind. When a person has not sufficiently expressed himself by telling the truth at this second level, the mind makes assessments. These judgments are distorted by the emotions withheld and avoided. Judgments like, I'm too tired, I can't take it anymore, it's not worth the struggle, and I've got to get out of this place, are products of incomplete disclosure of feelings toward and thoughts about others. Beth, unlike Mark, achieved deliverance from her mind's tyranny by telling the truth at the second level. Both started with similar suffering. He died, literally, by his own hand. She died to who she had been and achieved transformation. Who she was to herself passed away, and she moved on. The government of the early formation of mind was overthrown and no longer dominated the being. This transformation is as powerful as the reverse is tragic. The following excerpts from D.H. Lawrence's poem, A New Heaven and a New Earth, celebrate this type of liberation. I was so weary of the world. I was so sick of it. Everything was tainted with myself. Skies, trees, flowers, birds, water, people, houses, streets, vehicles, machines, nations, armies, war, peace-talking, work, recreation, governing, anarchy. It was all tainted with myself. I knew it all to start with because it was all myself. When I gathered flowers, I knew it was myself plucking my own flowering. When I went on a train, I knew it was myself traveling by my own invention. When I heard the cannon of the war, I listened with my own ears to my own destruction. When I saw the torn dead, I knew it was my own torn dead body. It was all me. I had done it all in my own flesh. I shall never forget the maniacal horror of it all. In the end, when everything was me, I knew it all already. I anticipated it all in my soul, because I was the author and the result. I was the God and the creation at once. Creator, I looked at my creation. Created, I looked at myself, the creator. It was a maniacal horror in the end. At last came death, sufficiency of death, and that at last relieved me. I died. And I am dead, and trodden to naught in the smoke-sodden tomb. Dead and trodden to naught in the sour black earth of the tomb. Dead and trodden to naught, trodden to naught. God, but it is good to have died and been trodden out, trodden to naught in sour, dead earth, quite to naught. Absolutely to nothing, 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 nothing. For when it is quite nothing, then it is everything. When I am trodden quite out, quite out, every vestige gone, then I am here, risen, accomplishing a resurrection, risen, not born again, but risen, body the same as before, new beyond knowledge of newness, alive beyond life, proud beyond inkling of furthest conception of pride, living where life was never yet dreamed of, nor hinted at, here in the other world, still terrestrial, myself the same as before, yet unaccountably new. I, in the sour black tomb, trodden to absolute death, I put out my hand in the night, one night, and my hand touched that which was verily not me. Verily, it was not me. Where I had been was a sudden blaze, a sudden flaring blaze. So I put my hand out further, a little further, and I felt that which was not I. It was verily not I. It was the unknown. I was a blaze leaping up. I was a tiger bursting into sunlight. I was greedy. I was mad for the unknown. I, new risen, resurrected, starved from the tomb, starved from a life of devouring always myself. Now here was I, new, awakened, with my hand stretching out and touching the unknown, the real unknown, the unknown unknown. My God, but I can only say I touch, I feel the unknown. I am the first comer. Cortez, Pizarro, Columbus, Cabot, they are nothing, nothing. I am the first comer. I am the discoverer. I have found the other world. It was the flank of my wife. I touched with my hand. I clutched with my hand, rising new awakened from the tomb. It was the flank of my wife, whom I married years ago, at whose side I have lain for over 1,000 nights. And all that previous while, she was I, she was I. I touched her. It was I who touched her, and I who was touched. Yet rising from the tomb, from the black oblivion, stretching out my hand flung like a drowned man's hand on a rock. I touched her flank and knew I was carried by the current in death over to the new world, and I was climbing out on the shore, risen, not to the old world, the old changeless I, the old life, wakened not to the old knowledge, but to a new earth, a new I, a new knowledge, a new world of time. The utter and complete newness, the vitality of original experience that Lawrence celebrates here, is available only through the destruction of the old world of lies, roles, and secrets. The death of this tainted world is the rebirth of the authentic self, including the world and the relationships that partly constitute that self. Level 3, exposing the fiction.